सरकारको चाहिँ किताब चाहिँ April 2022 मा निस्केको हो, 2 वर्ष अगाडि, and there is no sign of a South Asian edition up to today. He's been promised that there will be one at the end of the summer, but he's heard that kind of promise before, so unless we actually see the book, we'll believe that, right? अब सेकाजीको परिचय चाहिँ सेकाजीले नेपालमा पहिलोचोटि आफ्नो रिसर्च थाल्नु भएको चाहिँ 1994 मा, भनेपछि 30 वर्ष भयो। अनि उहाँ फरक नेपाली बोल्नुहुन्छ अभियसली, अनि उहाँले सामग्रीहरू आफ्नो रिसर्चमा आधारित भएर अङ्ग्रेजीमा पनि लेख्नु भएको छ, जापानिजमा पनि लेख्नु भएको छ, so much so, this is not surprising for anybody who knows anything about the intellectual traditions of Japan. उहाँको फर्स्ट बुक चाहिँ 2015 मा जापानिजमा प्रकाशित भएको हो। त्यसको टाइटल इन इंग्लिश वुड बी कन्भर्सिङ विथ द हेल्मो वुमेन एन्ड एन्थ्रोपोलोजी अफ लाइफ स्टोरी इन नेपाल। विशेष गरेर हेल्मोमा यो उहाँको कार्यक्षेत्र रिसर्चको पहिलेदेखि नै त्यही हो, 30 वर्षदेखि त्यहाँ गर्दै हुनुहुन्छ। यो त्यो रिसर्चमा आधारित एटलिस्ट 3टा आर्टिकल्सहरू चाहिँ सिराज जर्नलमा छापिएको छ, इन्क्लुडिङ वान द्याट वाज पब्लिस्ड इन नट दिस इस्यु, द लास्ट वान, बट द वान बिफोर जुन 2023। सो त्यहाँ पनि पढ्न सकिन्छ। दोज आर्टिकल्स आर नट इन्क्लुडेड इन दिस बुक, सो दोज आर सेपरेट। सो इफ यू क्यान रिड जापानिज, you'll have to read this stuff about our Yolmo research in Sinas and in other places, obviously. अनि यो किताबकै पछाडि दिएको उहाँको बायोडाटामा चाहिँ अब नेपालमा माइनोरिटी वुमेन र विशेष गरेर चाहिँ वर्किङ क्लास वुमेन स्पेसली इन अर्बन काठमाडौँ माथि उहाँको रिसर्च छ। आज किताबमा त्यो च्याप्टरहरूको पनि डिस्कसन हुने नै छ। अनि हाम्रो अर्को कलिग मीता प्रधान ले चाहिँ यो किताब चाहिँ सिनासको यो इस्युमा रिभ्यू गर्नुभएको छ। सो इट्स द लास्ट रिभ्यू इन दिस इस्यू। सो Meeta has a PhD in sociology. One PhD is in anthropology from University of Tokyo. Meeta's PhD in sociology is from the University of Michigan. Meeta ko kaam chai, she's been working as a consultant and leading Nepal offices of all kinds of institutes for a very long time. She came back to actually work in Nepal after she finished her master's degree. Worked here for a long time. Then decided a little later in her life that यो PhD पनि गरिहाल्नु भनेर, सो शी वेन्ट ब्याक टु स्कुल अनि त्यसपछि मिशिगनमा PhD गर्नुभयो। यो चाहिँ मिशिगनको विशेष गरेर हाम्रो चितवनमा लामो लङ्गिट्युडनल डेटाको जुन एउटा काम भइरहेछ, त्यो उहाँको PhD को रिसर्च चाहिँ त्योसँग सम्बन्धित थियो। र मोस्ट रिसेन्टली चौतारीमा उहाँको प्रेजेन्टेसन्सहरू चाहिँ तपाईँहरूले याद गर्नुभएको भए भर्खरकै गएको 2-3 वर्षमा मात्र उहाँले 2-3टा प्रेजेन्टेसन गर्नुभएको छ। यो चाहिँ नेपाल सोसल इन्क्लुजन research भनौँ न, यो सर्वे which was anchored at the anthropology department, central department of anthropology at Tribhuvan, त्यो टिममा पनि उहाँले मिलेर काम गर्नुभएको छ। and she's made at least one presentation on that, and also the last presentation she made at Totally was on the 2021 census. So before further delays, I turn to Seika ji first. अनि उहाँले चाहिँ यो किताबको बारेमा लगभग 25 मिनट जति बोल्नुहुन्छ। त्यसपछि मिताले अनि त्यसमाथि कमेन्ट गर्नुहुन्छ, अनि त्यसपछि वी ओपन द फ्लोर। ल तपाईको पालो।
Okay, thank you for your introduction, Professor Ji. Okay, so let's start. I'm Seika from Japan, and having been living a life for quite some time, this time I realized that I've never attended a book talk or discussion program attended by the author herself. That made me think what I expect to get from the occasion if I attend one. So what I would expect to hear at the book talk from the author herself is, one thing definitely is a general idea about what you will get from the book if you should read that. And another, something extra, something that you will not get just from reading the book. So there should be two things in this talk. What is in and not in the book. So today I will talk something of how the book came about as such extra, as well as of what this book is about. That is what is in the book. sorry. So let's proceed to what is not in the book, how the book came about. So having been living, sorry. So no book would just comes about, obviously, but to me actually it feels as if this book came about, even if no doubt my lots of labor were poured into it. Sorry, okay? This is too fast. So yeah, now in the what is not in the book part. So the book is the product of my long-standing engagement with people in Nepal, starting in the mid-1990s. In the more direct terms, life story interviews with Burma women in 2003 to 4 made a major resource for the part 2 of the book, while fieldwork with women from various occupational backgrounds conducted through late 2000s to early 2010s crystallized into chapter in part 1, as well as chapter 8 in part 3. Chapter 6 and 7 are mainly based on publicized materials over the years. Thus, the work for writings put into this book can be conservatively said to have started way back 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. But back then, the idea, let alone concrete shape of this book, was nowhere in the world, not even in my head. The idea that you can make a book out of those rather disconnected materials from different sets of my research over the years was brought forth by Pratoshji of Martin sometimes in 2015 or in early 2016 in a casual conversation. And he said something like, "I just want English में लेके को paper बात करना, ऐसा किताब बनाऊँ just do it." Which made me start to think, well, yes, I could make one somehow. He also said that he could publish my book from Chotari if I am willing. That got me on. If he had not made that remark back then, I would not have started to work on this at all. I think perhaps as you all around here are well aware, he is really diligent about making people work hard. While he is of course very hardworking himself. After I seriously started to get at the prospective book, however, he in no time conveyed that Chaudhary would not be able to publish my book, because so many were already in the pipeline. Actually, as I just said, I got on the plan only because I believed the book was going to be published by Chaudhary. I had no idea how I can find a publisher. I did not feel like I could do that either, but unable to say, okay, then I dropped the plan altogether. I ended up sending my proposals to a couple of publishers, which he kindly referred to find one that is willing to take it. After making a contract with one of them, the process of revisions ensued. I guess his remark at that time was not made with any serious thought. My response back then was also very casual, almost reflexive, made without giving any thought about it. Looking back, however, I think it was at that moment that the book came about. Put the other way around, if it had not been that moment, this book would not have seen the light. What kind of reflection can one get from this? Well, I don't know, but anyway, I found that moment quite intriguing. So let's proceed to what is in the book. So I opened the book's narrative by quoting these words uttered by a Nepali woman. मेरो त खास कुरा पनि छैन, अरू कोही जानेकोसँग सोध्नुहोस् न त. I have nothing special to tell, ask somebody else who is knowledgeable. And went on as follows. That was the kind of saying I would get to hear more often than that, when I attempted to get stories from Nepali women about their own experience of life and livelihood. whereas the response might show their coyness, modesty, sense of distance, or in nuisance in the face of an inquisitive interlocutor like the author, or all of these at once. There is at least another factor underlying the response: women's position in Nepali society, coupled with that their stories are not sufficiently important to be shared widely. They themselves often presume the same. It is rather a rarity that they have a chance to be cared about what they feel, think, or experience, even when they get constantly expected to care about others. It is even more of a reality that a woman is asked explicitly by somebody beyond her immediate personal circle, or even within that, to express herself, to talk of what she experiences. But please allow me to extensively read from my book, especially from its introduction. After all, what is in the book is in the book. So, and the book's purpose was stated in its introductory part in the most conceivably succinct form to my ability, for which I gave myself more than twice. So, quote continues. Consequently, many women become visibly uncomfortable when they are asked to do that. Many try to evade the conversation by citing such reasons like their being busy doing one thing or another, their being not good at talking, or their having nothing worthy of telling, as was presented just above. On one occasion, a woman even went on to say, positively refusing to respond, "Why do I have to tell anyone? My suffering stays on with me. It is no use telling of it to others." What this resounding no shows is that their silence might be something they rather rigorously executed. As such, it can reveal, as much as conceal, something important about their lived realities. Remaining in silence at social peripheries of one sort or other is apparently a condition on which many women continue to live their lives across contemporary Nepali society. It is in this context that the recently elected Nepali women municipal board member sounded so remarkable when she spoke. "Hamita bolna jane bhayo." We came to be able to speak. So, building on this take on Nepali women, the book attempts to bring their unvoiced or rarely heard experiences to light by attending to their words, deeds, and silence, asking such questions as: how are women in Nepal, diversely situated in class, ethnic as well as gendered peripheries, living their lives in the contemporary world? What do they experience, think, feel, expect, insist upon, and aspire for? What makes them happy or miserable? What difficulties and obstacles do they confront? How are they trying to work their way out? So the book is centered on Nepali women's experiences as lived out by themselves, as human beings with full body and blood, which have not always been fully appreciated and sometimes even neglected in their own living context, let alone beyond that. The book's focus on experience is also because it is we are touching on this full body and blood of others, their lives as experienced by themselves, that one starts to understand and connect with those people. Via efforts to make out their living experience in depth, we come to know them compassionately. That is, not as a functionally in a society or another piece molded in a cultural template, but as sentient beings, not necessarily active or agentive in the way we expect them to be, but moved with feelings, desires, and emotions. On the shared ground of inevitable vulnerableness, as beings that feel, we will be able to begin to forge ties with others in a more fruitful way. Of course, how and by what we moved, with what kind of feelings, desires, and emotions is itself deeply cultural. Nonetheless, I still feel safe to suppose. After all, there is no sharp divide in people's experience in Nepal, in Tokyo, or in any other places, in that all of us live to die, feeling pleasure and pain in the course, if at different matters in different ways. So it is through sharing our experiences that we can connect with others. This focus on experience has still another dimension. I wrote. And this focus on experience is something that makes the current project deeply feminist too. It is a feminist endeavor not only in that it takes up women as its main subject, but also in that it engages with this relatively neglected avenue in ethnographic investigations. Experience, and by extension, feelings, sentiment, and emotions have been consistently marginalized in modernity that is predicated upon such binary oppositions as public versus private, structural versus personal, rational versus emotional, and male versus female, rendering the latter subordinate to the former. Marginalization of experience in anthropology has everything to do with this modern setup at large. As a modern enterprise itself, the discipline's history has been unequivocally male-centered and replete with masculine biases, in which feminist practice has never been mainstream. Thus, the current project can be summarized as to explore aspects of Nepali women's lives by closely attending to their experiences, not to identify their society or culture which differentiates them from us, but to grasp a common ground beyond distances, with intimate sensitivity to otherness or to social cultural differences they may exhibit against oneself or among themselves. So let us proceed what kind of picture we got from this project. So in introduction, I put forth the picture of Nepali women that is to be emerged from the book overall argument. Nepali women's living realities are complex, diverse, full of contradictions, changing as well as transformative, and all in all, not to be reduced to such one-sided image of backward, victimized women to be rescued. And that is, they are more or less being marginalized, excluded, discriminated against, consequently suffering, anguishing, and yet being resilient, struggling, at times even resistant and speaking up, finding joy in and hope for living. Admittedly, the picture presents nothing novel. It is blunt, commonsensical as well as predictable. Its value appears perhaps solely lying in that it can at least shatter the simplistic colonial image of Nepali women, or women of the South for that matter, as poor, backward, victimized women. That constitutes part and parcel of the epistemological frame that perpetuates ignorance and arrogance against those women and renders them unable to speak nor be heard. What counts, however, is that the picture was forged through my particular encounters with various Nepali women and substantiated by concrete details of those women. I engaged with women from varied class backgrounds, including those in working class occupations such as construction work, domestic work, or street vending, as well as women of middle class or housewives. I engaged with women from varied ethnic or caste backgrounds, not least those of an ethnic group you know, but also those of other ethnic minorities or of Hindus, of so-called high or low castes. Based on those encounters, I dwelt on particulars of multiple sections of Nepali women in the chapters of the book, to which here I cannot delve into, even if they make, let me stress, the body of the book. It is true that I was able to embrace the diversity of contemporary Nepali women into my scope of study with very limited success. But I suspect the picture of overall Nepali women might not become very much different from the one presented just above on the abstract level if I could expand my engagement to include more sections of Nepali women with more depth of rapport and understanding. After all, the picture of Nepali women at hand looks familiar and commonsensical, because it is most likely applicable to women at large, almost universally, far beyond people. At the fundamental level, the picture of contemporary Nepali women shall not be different from that of contemporary women in other parts of the world. In a nutshell, at one level of abstraction, women are living the same basic reality across social, cultural, political boundaries. What I have found through delving into particulars of some Nepali women's lives was this. The finding may seem disheartening, given it took me some 20 years at least to get at it. But perhaps I need not get disappointed. As already touched on earlier, we do not explore the lives of others to identify their society or culture, which differentiates them from us. We go for the endeavor exactly to grasp the common ground beyond distances, with intimate sensitivity to otherness or social cultural differences they may exhibit. So let us rather celebrate the finding that we are very much like each other. Toward the end of the last chapter of the book, again I wrote, we have explored the Nepali women's lives not to make a rigid cultural other out of them, but to find the common ground beyond apparent distance. The road to overcome social marginalization and exclusion of women is far from being linear. That is one thing we come to realize by intimately attending to women's experiences from places as far as, for example, Nepal. With that realization, however, we are already a step closer to the future where we are, that is, we together with them, are able to connect more skillfully with each other to share this one world. So skillfully connecting with each other to share this one world. This seems important now than ever at this juncture of world history. When all of us on this planet have become mutually involved to such an extent that we are practically on the same boat. Our well-being, or even survival, hinges upon whether and how we get along with each other, overcoming mutual differences. Even if we might not be willingly sharing our lives with others, certainly we are already sharing risks with them. The remaining question is how skillfully we share lives and risks. Only through sharing we will sustain the world for all to live on. Otherwise, the world is already doomed. Cultivating the prospect for the world we share takes a lot of efforts on multiple fronts. Exploration into other people's world, into their lives as lived by themselves, certainly is one of such fronts. Then what meaning could this kind of endeavor or its outcome have for the people who get studies, that is, in this case, women in Nepal? If they do not agree with this picture of them, a whole bunch of discussion will ensue. That is not bad at all. But if they agree, what point would they see in expounding for them obvious truths that Nepali women are diverse and resilient? Apart from the discussions on particulars or particular sections of Nepali women, which I believe does have something to contribute to the body of knowledge of Nepali society and history, does the overall argument of this book present anything worthy for those studied? Here remains my concern. So that's it. If this small talk of my good somehow prompted you to take a copy of the book, I deem it worth getting done. Thank you very much for giving me this occasion to share something with you.
Thank you, sir. अब Meeta को पालो. She'll be making her comments largely based on the review that was published in the last issue of Silas. Give mic audience on.
Very voice. Too late. Namaste once again. Thank you very much. There's a first for everything, because I say this was the first time that I did a book review. So it was a bit scary, but it was also very exciting. It was exciting because I found the book so interesting. I kind of read it in one go and then I went back to read it again because there was so much of nuances in each chapter. And I kind of agreed with so much of what had been written that I found it very difficult to be critical, which is kind of demanded in a book review, to sort of state what you liked about the book and state what you didn't find what you were looking for perhaps, or what could have added value. So I really hope you have a chance to read the review. It will take you through the different chapters. And you will find that I have very little critical comments on different chapters, which is a testimony to how much I enjoyed the entire theme. And when we talk about Nepali women in all its diversity, Dr. Sato gave us this opportunity to actually delve deeply into the lives of a different variety of Nepali women. And, like she stated, in these different peripheries, in relation to caste, ethnicity, in relation to class, and of course from a gendered perspective. So the first 3 chapters, when I looked into them, they were based on like an intersection of gender and class, looking at women working in urban areas, in different works like construction workers, and delving into how satisfied were they with their jobs. Looking at the contours, of the life conditions of domestic workers, primarily women, most all women, and women who were kind of self-employed but street vendors, dealing with all the uncertainties of where they were going to go next. And all 3 chapters, it was, when the book talks about the new Nepal and how much of the aspirations, the visions, the hopes of all Nepali, not just women, have been or have not been fulfilled. I think we all have a sense of how disappointing it has been. At a policy front, I think we've made huge leaps, but when it comes to actually implementing those policies, many of these gender-sensitive, gender-responsive policies against discrimination, which would have given equal wages to men and women doing the same kind of work, if only these policies were able to be implemented, then we would have seen much more changes in the women's lives, these women that Dr. Sato was studying. But also very encouraging for me was to listen to the hopes of these women, their sense of agency. For example, the construction workers and even the street vendors, they claimed how time was up to them. They were in charge of whether they would go 30 minutes late to their job, whether they would wait for a few more minutes for their collectives, for their group of women to go together. So they had that kind of flexibility and they had that kind of decision-making ability. Whereas contrasting, the domestic workers, especially those who lived in, they literally didn't really have their own time, because their time was being bought, by the owners that they were living with and they were working with. So they were almost like on duty, 24/7 or at least 12/7 compared to the other. So the sense of agency that some of these women had, the sense of wanting to be better and being able to contribute economically to their families and their household, was this deep satisfaction that you could see and could see coming out of these women. But then again, these are all kind of informal workers, and they are not being acknowledged, and they are not, they are still in the margins, in the peripheries, and not really being talked about either at a policy scale or even to a larger extent within the development sector. And I have a long, my experience mostly is in the development sector. I haven't done a whole lot of research, I'm not an academician, so I was also all the time thinking of how would anybody in the development sector think about these issues? What would they do, about these issues? And the other thing that I really liked about the book overall was its accessibility. I would think any development worker who has, a good command of English could actually take up this book, read it, understand it, and kind of mull over, okay, so what is it that we might be able to do either at the policy advocacy front or actually being more conscious about listening to these women and hearing them better, listening to their voices better in order to see how, there could be sort of co-production in improving their lives. So to me, that was a big plus in this book, and I kind of felt bad that I didn't write about it in the review, because like I said, it was the first for me, and I thought I had to be academic, and I am not a very academic person, not a theoretical person at all. So I was kind of working on two different fronts. The second set of chapters deal with the Yolmo women, and I believe on the side, I also felt very embarrassed that I had never read any of Dr. Sato's work, and I was kind of feeling, oh, I lost out on a lot of this knowledge and a lot of these very strongly sort of felt words. But I am glad that you did listen to Pratyush and you did bring it out, put them all together in a book. So thank you, both of you, for that. In the second set of essays, what I found really interesting was that there are these two women from the same ethnic background with similar sort of experiences related to migration, and of course these chapters look at the gender and the ethnicity peripheries. But even though they had shared experiences, their thinking and what they thought, about feminism, for example, was so very different. For one, it was, coming from a development background too, she wanted to go back and sort of give back and make, ensure that other women also were able to have a voice, be able to make decisions, have that capacity. And so she was thinking along those lines, whereas the other woman, for her, it was all about her own choices. And I kind of thought about perhaps it was also because she willingly or unconsciously made the choice not to go back to the village and not to work outside of the home, and maybe justifying that, or maybe feeling in her subconscious mind, feeling that this is a choice that I made, and this is what I believe in terms of my rights, but maybe subconsciously missing out on crossing the boundaries of doing more in her life. And so that those set of essays were I really enjoyed those set of essays too. And especially when we think of Yolmo women, and I believe they're Taman, right? We look at every disaggregated data, on all socioeconomic indicators, and Tamang men and women and children fall pretty low, in terms of their achievements. And so there is this perception that, they're like really way down there, very marginalized. And we kind of, but in terms of, the whole project of listening to the experiences, listening to the thoughts of these women, I think it was even more compelling listening to these Tamang, these Yolmo women. And, but also, I kind of, feeling very sort of sad about this element was that despite making such a big economic contribution through migration work or through working in Kathmandu, they missed out. Some of them were missing out on getting married, in time and having their own families and children on time. But having to live with their, families, with their brothers, but again being under that being affected deeply by the patriarchal system and the patriarchal norms of not really being an equal member in the household, where the brothers are like, wondering how to divide up the property with this unmarried sister who has already contributed so much. Sort of these mindsets, despite having so much of economic contribution being done by these sisters, the thought of these patriarchal systems of property sort of movement within the family, that sort of still hasn't changed, and it's probably not going to change for a long time. So I kept thinking about what is going to happen to these women in the coming days. Will they go back to work in other countries and sort of try to be economically independent, even though that is not what they were initially sort of hoping to do, or initially that was not their goal in life, to be economically independent. They were filling in a gap, a very, very important gap in the family, but yet not getting that kind of equal status that they so deserved. The last set, of course, is Dr. Sato looks at quantitative data and also articles that have been published, and looks at how gender has affected different levels of participation of women in the political front. And that's where she also used the data from the Nepal Social Inclusion Survey, which I was so happy with, because despite such a rich set of data, and 2 rounds of data being available, it has not been used. And I feel personally, feel that it's a crime to collect more data and just have it lying there without anybody analyzing it. So one of my key aims these days has been to talk about this gender, caste, ethnicity, disaggregated data with 100 different indicators for over 88 different caste and ethnic groups in Nepal, and for young people, for scholars, for students to look at the data, use the data, and make the most of it to understand, the so-called new Nepal and what our different contributions can be to this. So I had set up, I had identified a few points that I wanted to just bring out in the end, but it was, a lot of them were what you actually brought out. So, things like understanding, connecting, and hearing the voices of these women in the margins. And the thing is, occasionally we talk about minority women, and these days I believe women in the margin, at least those who have a voice and are able to talk about these issues, do not like the term minority. So maybe we should, look at what is it about being a minority that pains them, that does not have a good, is not associated with good experiences, and kind of try to understand that better. I also, in terms of the entire feminist project, and in terms of anthropologists looking at a set of, not just a culture or a society that is different, but rather looking into what is it that we relate to? How are we the same despite having all these differences in our cultural, social norms? What is it that drives us together? And what is it that this togetherness can actually, propel us forward? Listening to the experience, the feelings, the thoughts, the emotions. A lot of times the early anthropologists, I don't think they ever talked about these things, but to have Dr. Sato's insights into this, and actually willingness and openness to listen to them and to put them into an analytical framework is very valuable, very valuable. And we need to sort of understand definitely the common grounds beyond distances, and focus on not just what is different, but what is it that ties us together. Me as a Newar, urban, educated, economically independent woman, to a street vendor where I might go if she's selling vegetables or selling chapels or whatever. How are we the same in all the differences that we are, and what is it that ties us together? What will bring the empathy up to the forefront for us to be able to participate in a journey where human rights and gender justice is fully sort of attained? Like I said, I don't want to be critical. I'm sure if I was nitty-gritty and if I talked to Pratyush a bit more, I would get more critical angles. What I did perhaps say is that when we talk about Nepali women, you mentioned that you talk, these are primarily urban women, and the experiences, the feelings, the emotions, the thoughts of women high up in the mountains where I used to work, there might be very closely linked elements, but there can also be a different perspective that we don't get to hear that often. So perhaps that would also be good. I also talk about maybe looking at multiple intersections, not just gender and class, or gender and ethnicity, but gender, class, and ethnicity. Maybe that would give us more insights into the differences. Maybe hearing some voices of the men in these families. What do they think about in terms of how their women are supporting their families, how their women are growing stronger, not just economically, but in terms of their decision-making capability, in terms of being a complete human being. Maybe that would also lend us some insights, and maybe these might come in your coming research in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
Meetaलाई धन्यवाद। यो फ्लोर ओपन गर्न फर आवर क्वेसन्सहरू गर्नुभन्दा अगाडि I'll ask Seika to respond to any comments that you want to respond to. But before you do that, I have to revise what you said, which is, of course, you mentioned that this casual conversation we had years ago led to the making of this book. I think when you wrote to say that the book manuscript was mostly ready in late 2021 or early 2022, I wrote back to say not that the Totari couldn't publish this book, but I wrote back to say Totari couldn't publish this book very soon. And the reason I didn't explain all of this to you, but we have a backlog of books, 2 of which we hope to publish this year. The first project was started in 2015. The second project was started in 2019. So I'm just giving you an idea of the backlog. And so I was suggesting that if we add to that backlog, the book will be published in late 2024. I'm pretty sure I said that. We can go back to our emails and check that for accuracy. But I'm really happy that you didn't wait. And then we moved to first talking with people at Cambridge University Press, because Michael Hutt and I had published this book in 2017 with Cambridge. So I think I introduced you to our commissioning editor there, Kutsia Ahmed. And one of our colleagues later wrote back to Seika saying, we don't publish books that are largely reprints. So that was that. And then around the same time in early 2022, our other colleague, Sato Sarkar's book had come out from Routledge, and I asked him to introduce Seika to Lubna Irfan. I don't know this person, but Lubna then took up this book, and she's mentioned in your acknowledgements. So I just want to clarify that. So now it's your turn. If you want to respond to anything that Meeta has said, please do that.
Well, thank you very much for neatly summarizing my the chapters of the contents of my chapters of my book. So I don't have, I have nothing to add or correct actually for that. And well, one thing you're very your review was very favorable. One thing I remember you said in that review, and this time also was men's perspective perhaps could be included to make the argument more inclusive, right? So I have a feeling that when you talk of women's issues, it is women's issues. Even though it is women's issues, the talk will quickly stray into men's talk. Men are asked to what they think about women's issues or women's empowerment. Well, of course, they have a big role, apparently. They must become different in the way they behave, in the way they talk about women, do you think about women, but well, my concern is, one of my concerns is that this constant tendency I feel that when women are talked about, men are quickly brought up to talk about them. So I think men have a big role to empower, to improve the status and living conditions of women. It's definitely true. But speaking of this issue, one saying which was quoted by late U.S. Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg, The quote is from a feminist in 19th century America, who was a feminist, abolitionist, and she said she was quoted to have said, I ask no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brother is that they take their feet off our necks. So men's primary role in this issue is to make way for women. It's not they must do favor for women's upliftment. Perhaps it's enough for them to just make their way. So that's my. But of course but it might be very interesting and it will make another research project to hear, to listen what men has to say about themselves or about their women.
Thank you very much. The reason why I brought up the men issue is without the change in mindsets of boys and men, and even women to a larger extent, this deep-seated dark shadow that hangs over us is not going to lighten up any soon. So my interest was that, if these women, the self-employed women, the construction workers, not the domestic workers as such, but if these women are bringing in, are contributing so much to the house, and they are saying, now we have a voice, now we can speak, now we can, make decisions, how are these changes being reflected in the minds of the men? And so that was my main thing about, not necessarily about what do men think about their women, but have the thinking of men changed or not? So that was one thing. The one thing that I missed out, I talked about, rural women perhaps not being so heard, but of course, what I really liked was the focus on urban women and urban poor women as well, because of this growing urbanization and us needing to know better, what women in particular are going through in these urban areas. So I thought that was an additional value that to this whole set of essays. Thank you.
Should I now open the floor? Yeah. Only. किताब पढ्नु भएको छ प्रश्न सोधौँ, नपढेको पनि प्रश्न सोधौँ, अङ्ग्रेजीमा सोधौँ, नेपालीमा सोधौँ।
I'm just curious, well, I'm not किताब चाहिँ पढेको छैन, भर्खर एउटा लाइब्रेरी लिएर आएको छु, so I'll be boring. त्यो चाहिँ I was just wondering तपाईँको methodology, and त्यसपछि can be how participatory it was, आजकल एकदम feminist participatory action measures भएर भन्छ नि, so were there some elements of it to that, or was everything designed around that? एउटा त्यो कुरा अनि अर्को चाहिँ after you have published this book, मलाई चाहिँ consentको कुरा आउँछ. I know in the beginning when we are doing researches, when we approach, we do ask for their consent, but then this has come up from the notes, right? I mean much after your work with them, so you are collecting it and coming up with a book. Did you have you talked to them? Have you informed them that there is a book coming up? Something, I'm just curious about how engaged you are after, after your research interviews with them also. I mean, to the point that now we're discussing this book.
Okay, thank you for your question. So the method is, my method for research is classically anthropological. It's mainly participant observation coupled with, in some cases, semi-structured interviews. I conducted that for urban women from various class backgrounds in 2010s. But my method is, well, classically anthropological. So, well, this method, this fact is actually connected to your second question, engagement with, well, informants or respondents. So, in this kind of research, it is quite difficult to inform what kind of research I'm going to be doing and what kind of outcome is going to be to result. Well, in the first place, for example, with those working class or working with those when I started to work on those semi-structured interviews with urban women, I naturally explained what I tried to know. And actually, the kind of answer I often get was the one I just presented at the outset of this today's presentation. So it was kind of, well, I explained, and many of them agree, Punta, Tigaja, they said, but I don't think they have any idea, they have any concrete idea about what those talks are going to make. But actually, I myself was not so very. I was not very sure what kind of text it may, what kind of shape it may take in the last writings. So, well, I tried. I certainly get the consent when I interview them, but afterwards, with some of them, my engagement continued, and it was not practical to get their consent every time I met. But certainly, those conversation took place between me and those women afterwards. Was put into, some of them were put into this book. And yeah, it's I think it can be an issue how we should deal with this kind of data, and it's very difficult. I try to get in touch with those women as far as I can, but you see, particularly continue to get in contact with women from working class backgrounds are especially challenging because they are very, very, in a way, mobile. They are not. Their dormitory is not stable. Their phone number could be changed, and they don't. Many of them, some of them do, but many of them don't use Facebook or something like that. So actually, I lost touch with some of them, and well, yes, that's actually the issue I have in one of my concerns. I have in mind, yeah. But I really like to know how others are dealing with this kind of things.
हजुर
I will be bilingual because I may have some difficulty in speaking English. Uh, First of all, I want to say that your book will surely contribute to policy making in Nepal. I'm particularly fascinated by your approach regarding ethnicity, gender, and class differences. Some 20 years ago, Nepal was striving to uh, design a constitution, especially after the interim constitution. There has been continuous discussion, and in 2015, it came up with an outcome that is always debatable, but they came up with broad headings of inclusion, ethnicity, gender, and other marginalized communities, also linguistic differences in some way. Likewise, they have formulated fundamental rights, and which emphasizes on equality of men and women, and equality in terms of classes also. These are very much broad terms, but they are there. And I am also very much impressed by Meetaji's comment that there are some gaps between policies and implementation strategies and programs. Surely these are to be addressed by everyone, including the state. And there is one women's commission as well. There is no shortage of infrastructures, organized structures and infrastructures and legal infrastructures. There are provisions regarding reservation quota.
अलिक छोटो बनाउनु पर्यो अब सुन्नु पर्यो
अब ठ्याक्कै छुँदाखेरि चाहिँ मलाई इम्प्रेसन भएको के भने कमन ग्राउन्ड खोज्ने, सर्चिङ फर कमन ग्राउन्ड, अनि यो सोसियल कल्चरल डिफरेन्स र अदरनेसलाई कम गराउने। यसको लागि पोलिसीमा त धेरै छ, तर यहाँले भन्नुभयो जस्तो पछिल्लो पटक पुरुषहरूको पनि सहयोग कसरी लिन सकिन्छ भन्ने कुरा पनि उठ्यो। त्यसलाई कसरी गर्ने भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ कन्सर्न धेरैको छ। अब स्टेट त ढिलो हिँड्छ, ल पनि ढिलो हिँड्ला, तर अरू मान्छेहरू यति डिस्कसन भइराखेको छ यो विषयमा। त्यस कारण आई एप्रिसिएट योर एटेम्प्ट बिङ ए जापानिज, एन्ड यु हेभ अल्सो touched on the point that this book will contribute towards striving for one world, comparing it between and among various nations, women's fates. Thank you. I don't know whether this is a question or comment.
Do you have anything to say?
Well, it was thank you very much.
Dorje?
I haven't read the book, but one of the conclusions one of the things you shared was the fact that there's more common things, there's more things common between people. And that sits well with me because that's something that I have discovered in my travels and work around the world and so on. But is there any experience during your ethnography studies, any experience that was interesting or anything that you were told that was weird or strange or that which you will share with people? But you know that time when I was doing this research in Kathmandu, or is there one that you would like to share with us?
Oh, well, one thing was which I actually produced here. So I, in many times, so I tried to talk with women. They say their talks are not worth to be heard. So that was very, very impressive. I think yes, perhaps I tried to take interviews in Japan, I won't get to hear those things. That's my take, right? So one of the things was that, and another thing, which I came up to my mind was, well, in some interviews, I got to hear some women say, I wish I had been born now. It's not, I think, there's no strict statistics here, but it's not majority. But still, there are some women who said that or, well, in the context of rebirth or incarnation, which can kind of, in this cultural environment, which are widely believed, I would say. Some would say, I want to be born a man in the next life. So that was something I felt. It sounds very intriguing to me.
Dipti.
Thank you so much for the sort of general intro to the book. मैले पनि पढेको चाहिँ छैन, I'm really sorry. So I am not asking this as an informed reader of this particular edition of the work. तर I am दुईटा question छ. एउटा चाहिँ like I'm struck by the chapterization भनौँ न. Then your part 1, part 2, the part 3 छ. And I'm sure you've addressed it in your writing, but maybe you can expand on that. Is what purpose does it serve to present these as 3 distinct sections that to an audience might seem very separate, like class peripheries, ethnic peripheries, gendered peripheries. Are you also, where is the space in which you also perhaps examine intersections or overlaps or encounters between these 3 peripheral notions or categories that seem to play a big role in women's experiences and encounters of their positions in New Nepal? एउटा चाहिँ यो chapterization कै कुरामा चाहिँ, what are your thoughts and how much does it allow you or limit you to explore the intersections? एउटा अर्को चाहिँ, I was really struck by one of the excerpts you presented early on in the presentation where you were talking about the position of women in Nepal coupled with your own keen awareness of it, right? So the women are also keenly aware of their own position while as in sections. I thought that was very, I don't know, that holds a lot there. And maybe if you could like unpack what that means for you, your research interlocutors, or the process of writing this work, is what does that keen awareness of one's position of womanhood in the class, gender, and ethnic peripheries do for a research on Nepali women, basically? I know that's a broad question, but those 2 are the main.
Yeah, Dipti's first point was also mentioned by Meeta in her review, I mean, near the end of her review, if you remember. Yeah.
Well, about on the chapterization of the book, well, the part 1 was named class peripheries, and the part 2 was named ethnic peripheries, and the third one was gender peripheries. And but actually, all through the book, gender periphery is at the center of attention, right? So in all of those 3 parts, so intersection of class and gender were explored. In the second, ethnicity and gender intersection was explored, and in the third section, it was kind of it doesn't deal with specific section of Nepali women, but it deals with women across the differences. So, well, I organized the book that way. It was the possibly it was the only possible way to somehow organize the overall argument for the book. It appeared to me, and well, it was well, that's what it is. Well, given my materials, I had it at hand. There was no much other choice, it seemed to me at that when I wrote the book. So what was the second question? Once awareness of being.
So the phrase like coupled with like the position of women in Nepal coupled with their own keen awareness of it, right? And so I was wondering what does particularly this keen awareness of one's position do, what does it allow for you as a researcher or like the research interlocutors in your book to sort of say about being a Nepali woman in a new Nepal, like other than what you said, the central argument is like common grounds, right? But then obviously the keen awareness of it is perhaps distinct given the class and gendered and ethnic peripheries. So what is it like? I don't know. This is not a question we need to. I'm not expecting a like a point answer, but I just thought that was very interesting because I think it also is speaking to the idea that the general theoretical idea of agency and empowerment, and there are so many keywords and phrasing that has come about in the last many decades of research that is done on Nepali, quote-unquote Nepali women. I thought it was very interesting that there was a section like the articulation of somebody's keen awareness of being a certain kind of subject of a certain kind of nation, right? And so it can be something that resonates with perhaps your work of doing research in Nepal for how many years, right? And so I don't know.
Well, I don't know this response is relevant or not, but discovering that Nepali women themselves are often very keenly aware of their peripheral, marginalized status in society, made me very aware, keenly aware that they wouldn't say what they think easily. They just remain silent. They could remain silent. So that made me attentive to not only their words, but also their silence.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry if I can respond. Like I agree because when you were saying some of the phrasing, like मसँग भन्ने कुरा केही छैन अथवा भनेर के हुन्छ, all of those things I feel like sometimes are the beginning of a longer statement that immediately gets shut down because they have started with something that is negative or rejecting or sort of. It sounds very much of a naive sort of statement, but actually that's a way to open up, and I feel like a lot of the times the research ends where it should begin is like, like what you said, like silence. Thank you.
Meeta, when I was in graduate school, I read obviously a lot of anthropology, partly because I was interested in the subject, but partly because also one of my PhD committee members was an anthropologist, and one of the qualifying papers I had to do was anthropology of South Asia. But in recent years, I've increasingly not read much anthropology at all, and so the only anthropology I read today is that stuff written by colleagues who work on Nepal. So about 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion here with anthropologist Tina Shrestha. Obviously, you know her. Writing about Nepali asylum seekers in New York. And so 2 months ago, when I read her book, I had a hard time. In the sense, I had a hard time following some of her narrative or some of her text. So the ethnography part was really enjoyable, but some of the theoretical dance she was doing around it, I had a hard time reading. And so I wrote to her saying, why did you particularly write in this fashion? And then we had a private conversation where part of the justification for that is she was saying basically she wrote it to basically also to demonstrate to other academics, anthropologists, that I can also write this way. In contrast, when I read this book, I think 1 or 2 chapters I had already read before. The one, for instance, published in the European Bulletin of Himalayan Research in 2016. So I skipped that chapter, but I didn't feel that way. In some way, you've written it in a very simple way, in the sense that several chapters begin with what you would consider important anthropology or literature related to the subject, and then you present a large section on your ethnography. And sometimes not sometimes, a lot of times you refer, at the end of the chapter, you refer back to the initial discussion, but you don't actually refer to the words that you mentioned. You refer back to the themes, but you don't do what a lot of academics these days do, which is to refer back to that literature review kind of thing, and then do your own dance. But I know personally that in several of your other writings and in the private emails that we share about stuff that is submitted to SINAS, you can write that way. So in this particular collection of articles, you've chosen not to write that way. And so my question is, was that very conscious? I mean, were you trying to make these essays much more accessible to not just academics? Meeta said she felt like she didn't really have to stop and ask herself what is this academic trying to say, and so it was easy to read. I felt the same way. So my one question is, in this particular book, was that a very conscious way of writing it?
Can I add a little bit?
Yeah.
So I have slightly different feeling when I read the introduction chapter. I think I read 4 or 5 pages, and in the second page you have started like bringing Malinowski and theory of anthropology to the Behar. I was wondering why should you bring that early? So you brought like theory too early, and that was kind of feeling I had.
Okay, the impression might be different from where you read, right? But well, yes, correct. As Pradhan has pointed out, the preceding academic theoretical arguments are minimum in this book. But actually, I always write like this. Well, not like teenage. I don't feel like presenting or showing myself to be able to write that way also, because being an anthropologist myself, but I'm kind of, I've been having a bit difficult times to connect or engage with recent theoretical anthropological arguments, and I didn't find them very rewarding for me. So I brought up a minus that old figure. So, well, I certainly felt I have to connect my argument to the tradition or academic field of anthropology. So I did that. But otherwise, it's not my inner felt necessity to do that. So I think so. I do that to the extent it is required to do to get done as an academic book or academic papers. Otherwise, I skipped. I was very busy doing ethnography in the right way, as I see it.
I have a question. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you can.
At the end of the last chapter, as I read it, I got the sense that the urge to be little more than an academic was present in the text, in the sense that you were making the point that Dodje and others have highlighted, which is you were trying to say that in writing about these particular sets of Nepali women, you're not trying to highlight the differences, but you're trying to show to the readers the connections. And there, when you say we, I think you're referring to women everywhere, but perhaps more particularly to women in Japan. And the reader in me kept thinking, maybe I would have enjoyed reading some stuff about, let's say, some comparative stuff from Japan. If you're talking about sexual harassment that women experience in Nepal in the last chapter, I kept thinking maybe you could have done that. Although you're not a researcher of Japanese society, but you lived. You're Japanese. You've lived there. You worked there, etc., etc. So I kept thinking that could have made this chapter more comparative. So A, why didn't you do that? B, how did you stop the urge from? I mean, in the last chapter, the advocate in you is almost trying to emerge out of the text, trying to be almost like something more than a feminist academic, something. In Nepali, we could say a Bikase academic, Bikase feminist. Okay, Bikase feminist means somebody who's not an academic per se, but is an advocate for feminist issues. So I think that urge is tamed in the text eventually. So is that a reading that you would agree with or disagree with?
Well, I hadn't thought of myself as being because of feminist, but
No, I didn't say that. I said I think the text almost reads like something could be written by a Bikase feminist, but you've tamed it. You've tamed it and said, no, tetera naza mat.
well, but I rather find it pleasing that you found you had that impression because Meeta pointed out this or another guy came had pointed out this book could have some implications for actual kind of empowerment or development of work for women. Actually, I was not so sure writing this book, writing the chapters of this book. I was not entirely sure what these writings could mean or could contribute to actual lives of Nepali women. So, well, if something would come out of this work I've done, I am very, very glad. I mean, not in the academic field, more than in academic field, but beyond that. Yes, but yes, perhaps I was at the same time hoping for that this work could do something in the real world, but at the same time, perhaps as academics. I tamed that urge in myself. Yeah, that's very correct. Yeah.
And the comparative Japanese stuff, if you want.
Well, but that if you do that, that would make the whole structure of the argument very much kind of complicated, I guess. But in the last part of the chapter, I didn't say explicitly anything Japanese, the Japan or Japanese word, but I talked of the actual difference between so-called the women from the north and the women from the south. So that difference was the situation those women in each places face. So that difference I pointed out was actually brought out of my experience in Japan, and that was whereas in Nepal, sexual violence was very, very taken greatly for women's personal worth. It could damage women's social worth. So it's a big issue. But in Japan, the trivialization of sexual violence, I think, was happening. But it could damage the women. The trivialization of sexual violence itself could damage women very seriously. Actually, not in the same way, but as it can be said to be lighter or can be taken less seriously than women in Nepal. So that's what I pointed out in the last parts of the chapter, actually based on my experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm sorry, I've tried to buy this book in the budget, but I couldn't find. He said like we don't have it yet, so I haven't read this book. I'm sorry, but I have a question, both of you. My question is like I don't know this is related to this issue or not, but how can Nepali women build solidarity or like have a power of empathy, even though they're from very different background, as you said. I mean, why I ask this question is like when I say like I'm addressing with citizenship issue, then citizenship through neighbor murder. Some women or even feminists say like, okay, I understand this issue, but the issue in nearby border is different. I mean, border between India and Nepal is different. Like the people, like women who live in nearby border, good at lying. I mean, judo border manji just. I met this kind of women or even feminists. Then I feel like the people or like women feminists who was born in Kathmandu and from private family, like how they can like have a get opportunity to understand the people from different the ethnic group or different caste, different like economic level or educational level. I always think like how can like build solidarity between this kind of different women in Nepal. I was always disappointed by this kind of because it's feminist because you're feminist. Yes. So that's why I wanted to ask this question. How can
She's addressed to both of you now.
Yes. के अरे कसरी समानुभूति लाग्न मिल्छ भनेर म सोध्न चाहन्छु. In this society.
Thank you very much, actually. So that's divides between among women from various backgrounds. That was what I pointed out in the book time and again, through various lines of difference. And when I speak of othering of women, minority women, those who do that are not only from those countries of the north, but actually often those educated middle class men or women in Nepal, right? So I just pointed out the issue. I think Meeta is better positioned to explain.
Mike is on.
Very important observation and experience, of course. The othering, that's what I liked when I was reading the book too. It's not just north and south. It's within the whole context of Nepal too. I mean, look at the whole the hierarchy, the power dynamics in relation to caste, ethnicity, class, everything. So there is that othering within and particularly within, I would say, Nepali women. If you read Sarah Damar's work, it's like who is leading the Nepali women's empowerment, whatever in Nepal. It's a certain group of women, and for the longest time we weren't listening to. We thought we had. I mean, this group of women thought they had. Everybody was the same, so we would all go under the same flag. But when you come up with works like this, when you read works like this, and then you're very honest with yourself and you kind of reflect on what's going on in your own house. I live with my mother-in-law. I live with my husband, who's a very Nepali man. And if I'm honest about, what do I suffer from compared to what do a lot of these other women suffer from, I can still find commonalities. I might have traveled the world, I might have gotten my PhD, but I have to be honest and I have to look at the thread that's, that connects me with other Nepali women in all their diversity, acknowledging the diversity and respecting that. And perhaps all Nepali women don't need to come together as long as a group of Nepali women who have their issues lead and others provide the support, provide that respect, provide that mutual cooperation. But the thing is, when you don't know the other, when you don't understand the other, then it's fear. It's like you have to preserve your territory, you have to maintain your status, and it's fear. More than anything else. So I think with academic work, with research work that is very accessible, without researchers and academicians just talking to each other, when they try and talk to people on the ground and provide the evidence for people on the ground, and people on the ground have the capacity to listen and think, then I think there is solidarity. Then you build empathy.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for answering.
I'll have to stop now. We usually stop at 4:30. Now it's 4:40. So Seikaजीलाई केही थप्नु मन छ?
No, just I want to say thank you.
So, on behalf of everybody in the room, सेकाजीलाई यो किताब लेखिदिनु भएकोमा र आज यो किताबको बारेमा बोलिदिनु भएकोमा धन्यवाद। मितालाई पनि धन्यवाद कमेन्ट गरिदिनु भएकोमा। दुवैजनाले चाहिँ आजको हाम्रो छलफल रमाइलो बनाइदिनु भयो। अनि हामीहरूलाई चाहिँ अरूहरूलाई चाहिँ यो तालिकामा ध्यान दिएर अरूहरूमा पनि आउनु होला भनी थ्याङ्क यू।
How are you?